Here's a question. What do a champion weightlifter, a pole dancer and a conservative lesbian all have in common? They all want to get Clover. Clover Moore, that is, who next week will recontest the Sydney Lord Mayoralty in the local council elections. After 8 years in the job, a network of powerful forces is lining up to topple her, and the contest has produced some unusual alliances. Sharon O'Neill reports.
Hello, just at home. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
For someone who doesn't like elections, Clover Moore is a glutton for punishment.
You vote for you, definitely. You look after.
I've been re-elected, 4 times in the last 8 years. Every 2 years I go to elections.
It's interesting how personal it is, isn't it? How intimate.
It is, of course, all her own choosing. Clover Moore is both the state member and the Lord Mayor of Sydney. She's held both roles for the past 8 years. But all that is about to change.
The Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore, is on borrowed time in State Parliament after new laws were passed banning dual roles like hers.
In April this year, the O'Farrell government passed legislation to stop sitting MPs running for council. That means if Clover Moore wins the race for Lord Mayor, she will have to resign from her state seat of Sydney.
And clearly people have seen the synergies and the effectiveness and how complementary those roles are and how important they've been. And they've supported me. And so I think they're pretty concerned and angry, as am I.
But Clover Moore's opponents say after 8 years of running this city, there's also increasing anger directed towards her.
Ms Moore, could you please tell me why your local government council, excuse me, I'm speaking, why the council allowed this development to go through on my sun-drenched house?
We've had a lot of Meet the Candidate meetings and I've seen the response of the community. They are not happy and they are not satisfied with the current council.
I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on our...
There are 7 candidates running for the mayor in Sydney: Labor, Liberal, the Greens, Independents, the Sex Party, whose candidate hasn't attended any of the candidates' forums, and Living Sydney.
Good evening. My name is Angela Bithulkas and I'm the Lord Mayoral candidate for Living Sydney.
She's very populist, so I have to say that a lot of her ideas are not achievable, but they're very popular.
They're well looked after, I think, from our perspective.
Cafe owner Angela Bithulkas is running for mayor under the Living Sydney banner.
We're a true independent team. We're made up of a very diverse and dynamic group of people who are both small businesses and residents within the City of Sydney.
On Wednesday, Living Sydney announced it had done a preference deal with Labor's Linda Scott.
We sat down and looked at every team, every candidate and all their policies, and we felt that after evaluating all of that information that our beliefs, we could work with Labor.
Sean and I had a meeting with...
The deal surprised the Liberal Party's team, which includes Christine Forster, the sister of federal opposition leader Tony Abbott. Mayoral candidate Edward Mandla was hoping he would be the one to be aligned with Living Sydney. Clover Moore was also taken aback, but not because she was looking for a deal.
I am surprised because I believe the Living Sydney group is really a group based on, is opposed to our sustainability policies of the city, and yet our Labor councillor has supported those initiatives on this council, and they're in keeping, in fact, with federal Labor policy.
On Thursday, a small group of anti-Clover Moore protesters came to the Sydney Town Hall. The rally was organised by the Consumers and Taxpayers Association, a group dedicated to protesting against the federal government's carbon tax.
She has a monopoly.
At the start of the week, the group's organiser, Jacques Laxale, was promoting Angela Bithulkas on his website.
Carter is supporting the Living Sydney team, led by Angela Bithulkas, as the mayoral candidate.
But when the preference deal with Labor was announced, the endorsement disappeared.
Well, basically, what's happened is section of the Greens movement, with the Clover Moore backing, have have basically contacted, from what I understand, have contacted them saying, listen, hang on, Katter is an anti-carbon tax people. What are you doing associating with carbon tax people, anti-carbon tax people? Your preferences are coming from Labor, and they've just thought of their own, their interests, and I can understand it.
I need to be absolutely clear. No links whatsoever between Living Sydney, myself, and this organisation.
Do you have any support for the issue that they've been campaigning on? I mean, are you an anti-carbon tax person? Is that your belief?
No, that's not my belief. And as I said, we have no links to this organisation or their beliefs. Absolutely no links.
This person has got a lot of credentials. Yeah, I mean, even though they don't want to know us, that doesn't bother me.
There's a level of inexperience there, perhaps, where they panicked a bit and thought, oh, hello, I'm going to be identified with all of this and things are going to be said about me.
Why would she worry about being associated with this event?
I've no idea. Oh, well, someone said this is an anti-carbon tax rally. God, I wish it was.
Is the Living Sydney candidate your greatest competitor in this race for mayor, do you think?
Look, I hope people will vote for continuing progressive, stable government. I don't believe that the other candidates in this election represent that.
Liberals are going to put an end to Clover's hatred of car ownership.
The issue that's causing the biggest headache for Clover Moore in this election is parking.
There was this philosophy running that if we build new developments, we should have zero parking or half a parking spot per apartment. And it's just completely failed. What it's done is it's pushed all the cars out on the street. You've been a resident living in your house for 20 years. All of a sudden you can't park anymore.
One of the issues that is just driving people insane is this incredibly extreme ideology of being anti-car.
Well, look, we can't change the width of the road. We can't change the space between the buildings, and we have growth. So how do we accommodate it? We're looking for solutions, but we really want to have the city such a pleasant place where people feel they can walk if they're able, cycle if they're able, use public transport if they're able, and that frees it up for the people who have to drive, and some people do.
4 years ago, Clover Moore won 56% of the mayoral vote and just under 50% in the council vote.
Clover Moore's been a fixture in inner city politics for 30 years. She's got an enormous personal profile, enormous personal support. I think it's highly likely she'll win another term as Lord Mayor. I think the only question is whether she'll manage to bring 4 or 5 councillors and achieve control of the council at the same time.
Did you get the ballot paper in the mail? You should have got.
The Labor Party used a community-based pre-selection process to choose its candidate, Linda Scott, who knows she has to distance herself from the Labor brand.
I know that we have to earn back the trust of the community. We had a community pre-selection in this seat. We had over 4,000 people vote to select me as Labor's candidate. So my only accountability is to the community of the inner city.
The Liberals chose heavy lifter Edward Mandla to try and win the top job. Number 2 on the ticket is Christine Forster, sister of Tony Abbott, who's declared herself a small L Liberal and big L lesbian.
I've chosen to pursue a career in public life because I want to give something back to my community. That's it, pure and simple. And I guess the nature of the interest in my personal life, I have to take that on board and kind of manage that for myself and my family. But you know, it won't deflect me from pursuing, you know, my goal of entering public life to give something back to my local community.
You getting any advice from your brother?
Look, he's always full of good advice.
I think there's a section in the Liberal Party that want Clover Moore to win the Lord Mayoralty. So she'll have to resign in the seat of Sydney, and they will get their candidate up in the seat of Sydney.
If Clover Moore is re-elected on September 8, it will be a day of mixed emotions. The new rules will mean she will have to resign her state seat before the first council meeting.
It'll be very hard, and I'm very sad about it, and and I think my constituents are too, and I think we're pretty angry, you know. I was elected for a 4-year term just about 18 months ago, and I shall be seeing out that term.
Of course, there's a mayoral race to win first, and Clover Moore is taking nothing for granted.
I hope that the majority of people will want to support our progressive government. If the majority of people don't want me to, I'll be philosophical, but I'll be sad.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.